Yes, yes, please. Settle down. Please reduce all talking to a minimum. Find your seats. Everyone is find your seats. Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for entering this lecture hall at such short notice. This was not something I planned specifically, but I only planned it a week ago, and I am very pleased to see the turnout here. Again, to remind you, this is a lecture about the nature of dragons, so if you find yourself in the wrong hall for a particular class or subject matter that is not pertaining to dragons, you are free to leave or stay at your leisure. If you are doing this for a particular class, I do encourage note-takings, as of course. I will not be accepting questions or comments for the duration of the lecture. I will entertain them after the lecture in case any of you have any questions or comments that you would like to ask or add about the particular topic at hand. For introductory sake, allow me to introduce myself for those of you who are unaware. I am Dimorg Gladstone. I am the professor of history here at the University of Caspia of Signar. And I do hope that you will find this lecture educational and informative. So with that out of the way, we shall begin. Scholars, historians, mages, theologians, philosophers, wise men, druids, sages, and hermits have all studied the beginnings of existence, and to the surprise of no one, have been incapable of understanding our world's origins. However, one thing that is agreed upon and very hotly debated are that in the times before the gods and goddesses, before the worm, the infernals, souls, your Cain, or even Cain itself, the dragon Athanc has existed. Little was known, less understood about the Athanc and its powers. Some Dunian myths state that the devourer worm created Toruk, however. The Blackclads dispute this fact. They say in their recorded histories that Toruk and his Athanc, albeit intelligent, are outside of the natural cycle of Cain and are not actually alive. It may be the case that the Athanc is the manifestation of anti-life, that is to say, the foil of existence. What we know comes from two sources. First, we have omnipotent Lortis of the Wormwall, leader of the southern dominion of the Blackclad Order. Second, we have recorded, with great difficulty, an account of Thagrosh Hellborn, the self-appointed prophet of the dragon Everblight. Omnipotent Lortis wrote, dragons invoke the fascination of our order because their destructive power exceeds the natural wrath of the devourer. It arises from some wholly tainted and unnatural source. It is not uncommon for the ignorant to link the dragon with the worm, and myths of several religions paint the devourer as the originator of dragons, but there is no truth to these legends. Dragons are a perverse mockery of true life and exist entirely outside of the natural order. They share no commonality with any living creature on Cain, nor any part of the cycle of Ouroboros or Dunia. The aforementioned Thagrosh wrote, the Athanc is like nothing else on Cain. It bears no similarity to any other living thing, yet it is itself wholly self-aware and uniquely alive. The Athanc is the first sentient entity upon Cain, risen from the consciousness and assuming the name Toruk. The generative principles of the Athanc might have sparked the seed of all life. Dragons do not require any of these substances lesser beings crave. Not food, water, or even air. There are some who doubt the existence of both Thagrosh and the organization known collectively as the Circle of Ouroboros. However, these two accounts, being from such different sources, would lead me to believe that there is at least a thread of truth, a thread that runs throughout the histories, literature, and oral traditions of Imran's kingdoms and cultures. Regardless of what the Athanc is or how it came to be, at some point it shaped and created its primary form. Toruk, the Dragon Father, also referred to in various documents as the black worm, and the font of all blight, depending on the source for which you are referencing. Toruk is the oldest being on Cain, according to these references, even older than both the Old Witch of Kador, Zavana Aga, and the Wormwood Tree. He is the worshipped deity of the Church of Toruk, found in the Scarred Islands. The Crit Church teaches that Toruk is a god who once flew over Cain before any and all life even formed. While their theology is clearly biased, Dragonfather seems to have the power and longevity to back up their conclusions. Next slide, please. When life eventually erupted on the face of Cain, Toruk saw the first creatures and made the conscious decision to beget children himself. We have multiple accounts explaining why Toruk decided to do this. The Worm Cycle, a collection of Draconic lore penned in 600 BR, gives us the following account. The great dragon Toruk, arrogant with power and filled with a desire to dominate all living things, gave birth to his Get by splintering his own massive heartstone, this Athanc, and hatching a brood from the shards of his soul. Other accounts, such as the Church of Toruk doctrine, states that Toruk sought to understand his own power and nature, and thus set out to test his own abilities by creating life. A contemporary of mine, Professor Victor Pendrake, wrote in the Studies of Extraordinary Zoology. I believe many of you should have a copy. He believes that Toruk created his progeny out of a need for mental stimulation and a desire to not be alone in the world. All the time Toruk made his decision, he had to have been the only sentient being on Cain at the time. Next slide, please. Surprisingly, it is possible to date when Toruk decided to create the other dragons. We have credible Ruic records that place the first sighting of dragons, aside from Toruk, around 550 BR, so we know that Toruk had to have started his creation process before that year. It's very interesting to note that Toruk also created the language known as Dikara, a language most referred to simply as Draconic, or the language of the dragons. He likely did this about the same time he created his brood. Draconic scholars have endlessly searched for the answer to the question of how many dragons were sired from Toruk and how many Athanc shards remain. In short, we do not have an accurate account. It is said that the Blackclads have in their possession the Wormstone, a runic stone embossed with the most comprehensive collection of Draconic names in existence. However, it is still yet to be completely translated even after thousands of years of coactive study. I have here a list I was able to compile of the dragons that we know of their aliases amongst all cultures and what became of them in the various histories. First and foremost, we have Blightagast, holds vigil for Toruk's return to the mainland in the Wormwall Mountains, also known as the Seether, Old Ravager, the Boiler of Seas, Wormwall Serpent, and the Black Ship Bane. Next we have Charsong, devoured by Toruk, also known as Twin of Ashenfos, Edros's Get, the Mountain Shadow, and Sun Drinker. Next we have Chimera, no other information available, also known as the Shapeless, the Forgotten, and the Monster of the Abyss. Edros, split into Charsong and Ashenfos after the giants of Behemoth defeated the dragon, also known as the Ocean Drinker, Burner of the Seas, Baal Light, and Behemoth's Curse. Galvang, Athanc was consumed by Toruk in 1387 BR, also known as Galvang, the Despoiler, the Town Ender, and the Ashen King. Everblight, also known as Etherball by the Alyosanton, the Bane of Isra, Shadow of Mord, and the Unseen Betrayer. Halfang, also known as Wormlich, Frostfire, the Frost Mother, the Preserver, Old Horse Frost, or Hoar Frost, depending on your dialect, Glistenfor, in the nice tongue, Wormlicht, and the Preserver. Nectar was consumed by Torek, no year given, aka Terror of the Thalborn, Incendious, and the Lurker Below. Nidoboros, considered by me to be Torek's most powerful child, Athanc consumed by the dragon Blightergast, also known as the Favored, Everflam, Farseer, and the Lord of the Howling Wastes. Pyromalefic, consumed by Everblight at the Castle of the Keys, also known as the Corpse Feaster. Shining One, Grimvane in the Tongue of Iosen, and the Poison Seed. Scarfang, aka the Soul Eater, the Ravenger, Lord of the Black, in Ceruic called Schaldenfangen, and the Stone That Burns. Shaskis, consumed by Torek, no year given, aka the White Dragon, White Mother, Scale Bringer, the Sacrifice, and the Scourge of Calassia. Gilburn, or Gilburn, depending on your dialect, aka the Death Knell. Umbergoven, and Hodorak. Those are all the children we know that are known to us, to the names of man. Of all of Torek's children, I'd like to take a minute to specifically single out Chimera. We know that it is the first known by another name and now lost to history. According to Liberated Iosen sources, this dragon was caught up in the cataclysm brought by the destruction of the Bridge of Worlds that resulted in the obliteration of the ancient empire of Laos. The dragon was directly hit by the explosion of energies and somehow survived. However, its attack shot was permanently damaged and has, according to the documents, been fundamentally changed. This dragon became an ever-changing monstrosity and currently dwells in the Abyss, the continental crack that runs north-south rough to the middle of Emerin in the Bloodstone Desert. Shortly after Torek spawned his children, his brood of spawn began to rebel against him. The Wormwall cycle tells us, these creatures were to be his children who stood or stand beside him, and first his dame overcame. However, in his arrogance, Torek failed to account for the nature of his get. His children, hungry for their own freedom, rebelled against their father, and tore at his hide with claw and tooth. Some escaped Torek's wrath, others rejoined his flesh when they were consumed by his teeth and the flame in his belly. Since the beginning of the struggle, all accounts of the Lord of Dragons has been terrible indeed, for he has hunted his children throughout the ages, seeking to devour the shards of his heart that they contain within their breasts. The Athanc War is much more than a war between dragons, it seems. It is a god struggling to reclaim power over his unwanted children. In Torek's arrogance, he believed his power would enable him to impose his law to his children, underestimating the avarice and greed of those modeled from his own form. Eventually, his tenuous hold over his offspring snapped, and the Athanc War began somewhere around 5500 BR. And that concludes today's lecture, first part of the lecture of the so-called Athanc Wars. I thank you all for listening in. If you would like to support the university, please leave your comments below. You are free to donate any amount of sums you feel are accurate. Please subscribe if you have not already. And I will see you next time. Lecture dismissed. You're free to go.